So, John, I just saw that Elon said on a tweet that next year he's expecting that there will be a launch every 2 days out of Florida. That's amazing. You think they can do it?
I don't know. Let's find out. Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Guess who I am with again? It's Dr. Scott Walter. We are going to talk about all things Starlink and SpaceX, and including a very impressive picture you took just last night. Pretty awesome stuff. So, and you'll get to see where the SpaceX logo comes from. So bonus points for people. So anyway, welcome once again, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. We already planned a few days ago to start talking about the insane launch cadence that SpaceX has and what they plan on doing next year, and how are they going to be able to achieve that. And then it seems like there's been a lot of discussion about that as well from other tweeters, as well as Elon, and we'll look into one of those tweets. But last night they had number 80 for the year, and
that's crazy.
I get a picture of that from my rooftop.
Which is
want to take
awesome,
a look?
By the way. And by the way, we are coming to you live via Starlink. Both of us are on Starlink. So
on both sides.
We are not only talking about it, but we are utilizing it as we speak right now, which is very cool. Starlink, yeah, Starlink, baby.
Yeah. So with that in mind, it was a Starlink launch last night. And I do like capturing the launches from the top of my roof when it's possible, which usually night launches I can actually see from 150 miles away. And we'll take a peek right there once I get my sharing to work correctly here, and we'll just go ahead and see. So this is the shot I had been working on for a little while to try to figure out where to align my Starlink antenna to actually get the trace of the plume as it crossed the sky. So this is the picture that I got, enhanced a little bit because I probably had it a little bit dark at first. And that's a little bit of a close-up to get an idea. And the whole idea of this was not to make the X logo, but to make the SpaceX logo. Okay.
Right.
So the SpaceX logo, the X's are really at about 45 degrees. And of course, one of the crosses that go along here, you can notice is kind of a little bit parabolic in shape or curved. And it just kind of extends out to infinity. If you look at the SpaceX logo, if you look at the X logo, it's more of a 60-degree angle that they're actually forming the cross.
Right. And for those who might not know, the bright light is the first stage with nine Merlin engines, and the faint light is the second stage that only has one. So that would be,
and there's a
and also it's farther away. Yeah,
there's a gap there on the staging, which is why you'd like to do a hot staging, because that's about 11 seconds between there. And you notice it seems to get brighter as we go along, and that's because the space jellyfish just gets bigger and bigger as it gets higher up here. And also notice, you can see it starts getting lower in the sky because it's now actually starting to orbit. That is just wild. Now, I did delay the shot a little bit here from the horizon, and I was just like sitting there like, I can't believe I'm letting the shot go by. I can't believe I'm not taking the picture. Usually rises right around here and kind of comes straight up and curves a little bit funny. So in order to get it, NEC, I probably should have waited a little bit longer in order to get them to line up. But I'll try again next week. And that's the whole thing, is that everyone asks me, how did you get that shot? And the answer is very simple. Lots of practice and lots of opportunities, because they are launching so often. I can go out there, get these shots, start to play around with it and figure out what's going on. And I have a better idea of what to do, next week, assuming the weather is good, to be able to make it look a little bit more like the logo by probably moving everything in the background and doing that.
Yeah. It's very cool. So what are we looking at? About 5 minutes exposure, 6 minutes?
Oh yeah, probably at least, because I was really tracking the second stage really long. Going out there, and it goes on for quite a bit. So it probably was about a 5-minute exposure. Well, I mean, the first minute of the launch, I think I posted this at 12:14. Right. And I was just excited when I saw that it actually came out the way it was supposed to, that it crossed where it was supposed to. It wasn't too high, it wasn't too low. And I just put it out there. So it went out at 12:14. The launch was at 12:08 or 12:05. And I think the first minute I didn't do anything, waiting for it to get up to there. So so it's been about 12 minutes.
Very cool. And what'd you say?
Maybe
it's
about
got
6 minutes longer.
150,000 or so views on X already. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And almost 400 reposts.
Wow. That's awesome.
So yeah. So it's been doing pretty well. And so what we're going to do today is we're really going to talk about the launch cadence, which allowed me to be able to, let's say, perfect this. You know, it's like basically you hone your technique through just a lot of use.
This is exactly why Tesla does this. They did it just for you, so you could get that perfect photograph. They're like, yeah, we need to increase our launch cadence so Scott can get the right photograph for us. So yeah, there we go.
Yes. Yeah. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at the launch cadence. And then after that, we're going to go into details, a little bit more of the history of where the shot came from and how I was able to set it up and kind of pull it off. It's not AI or anything like that. As a lot of people wanted to know. I was like, wait a minute, was that AI? Is that a real shot? Is it Photoshopped? I was like, nope, it's the real thing. So yeah, so before we go in there, we're going to talk about the launch cadence. And I want to give credit where credit is due, is that whenever I have lots of questions about different rocket configurations and possibilities and whether my ideas are wild or not, I always bounce them off Ozan or Arrhenius, and they are a really good resource. And they don't have anywhere near as many followers as they really should, because they know a lot, and their discussions and their threads are really, really interesting, some of the topics to get into. So if you are into aerospace or anything like that, you definitely want to follow both of them. And so there's a couple of tweet threads, or posts, I should say, that Ozan recently posted sort of talking about this as well. But before I go into that, I think that the first thing we should look at is actually a tweet that came from Elon himself.
There we go.
And that is, talking about Slick 40, which is the second launch pad after 39A. This is the main one that all the Starlink launches go out of.
And
it now has crew capability.
They now have, they have their crew arm on there too now, which is super cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And somehow they managed to put the crew arm on there while launching like every 4 days, which is just kind of amazing. Now, so Elon says the SpaceX launches every 3 days from the Cape in Florida. Next year, every 2 days. Okay, that's not quite accurate. And actually, I think Ozan called him out on that. He said average is 4.5 days between launches for the last 10 days out of Florida. If you count Vandy in there, you might be getting close to 3 days. And that's just kind of recently. Okay. Right now, the closest that they've been able to do launches between Slick 40 is like just under 4 days. So they had been like at 5 days for a while, and they got it to 4. They had one that's like 3 days and 21 hours or something like that. So they're right at about 4 hours for that. The thing is, the cadence out of 39A is horrible. It's like once a month. And so what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and take a look at a little spreadsheet I put on here to get an idea of, are they going to make 100 this year? That's what everyone wants to know. They said aspirationally they want to hit 100, and can they get to 100? I'm predicting it's probably going to be maybe 98. I hope they can actually hit it, but they are getting pretty close. So we have the different pads here at KSC, Slick 40 and 39A, and then out in Vandenberg is Slick 4E. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a certain turnaround time that, this is like the average turnaround time we're looking at. And so we can start playing with these turnaround times to get an idea to predict what it's going to look like in the future and potentially this year. Right now, I think there's only been 11 launches out of 39A up to this date.
Right.
And there's only been about 23 out of Vandenberg. Yet Vandenberg seems to be holding a pretty consistent 14-day pace. So I think they're really on schedule to make 26.
And if I'm remembering correctly, though, they're about to get access to a second launch pad in Vandy too. Is that correct?
They may. I mean, that would help having a second launch pad. The thing is, I don't know whether they have the demand.
Yes, because those are all polar orbit.
They're specialized orbits, so you just can't do any old thing. And it really depends. So when you start playing around the numbers, you have to realize there may not be the demand where you can do everything out of the Cape, including polar orbits. It's just that if you do a polar orbit, it's better to do out of Vandenberg because you don't have to worry about flying over Cuba.
Right.
That's one of the reasons.
Well, and also it relieves a little bit of the stress on, Slick 40 is quite the workhorse there. 60 launches.
Now that's what it will need to achieve.
Right.
In order to do that, they still need to do about another 13 launches this year.
Right.
Okay. Now it's possible 39A. I know that there is a Falcon Heavy that just got announced today, or that's going to go December 7th. We'll see. Because the Falcon Heavies always tend to slip a little bit. The thing is, when you have a Falcon Heavy, especially when it's sitting out there, it monopolizes the pad, which sort of prevents it, which is why it's like this 30-day turnaround. So 39A is being used for crew, for Dragon resupply, for Falcon Heavies, for NASA missions, and they tend to not want to rush things. So
Right.
that's why you're really looking at, and I think there was like maybe one Starlink launch out of 39A. I was really shocked when it happened. Like, oh my God, a Starlink launch out of 39A. I never thought that was going to happen. So,
Right.
so you see, it's kind of a disappointing about once a month. They're only getting 12 there. So depending upon what happens, maybe we hit it, maybe not. It's going to be really, really close.
Right.
Okay. Now, if we want to go beyond that, we can start playing with these numbers to sort of see, because we have 3 drone ships. We've got Just Read the Instructions and a Short Follow Gravitas, which are in the Cape. And then out at Vandenberg, you have, of course, I Still Love You. And what I've seen is there was a big guesstimate of like, well, how quickly can the drone ships turn around? Now, it's about 500 kilometers downrange they have to go. And these are barges, okay? And while they're autonomous, they are autonomous just to stay in position. Yet they are still tugboats and crews that are out there with the ships at the whole time. So it's a tug that takes them out, and the tugs can only make them go about 9 knots. I mean, it's just the reality that it's not designed to go through the water very quickly. So to cover a distance like 500 kilometers, you could, in theory, do it in about 32 hours. But I mean, that's just assuming no problem with currents or weather or having to go around anything, you know, directly there. More than it takes you probably 2 days out, 2 days back, at least a day on site and a day back in port. So the reality is you probably could never do better than 6 days. And what I've seen is that usually they're longer than that. But in October, it looked like all 3 of these drone ships actually were able to demonstrate a turnaround of 8 days. So we know 8 days is possible. Whether you can maintain that cadence, it's hard to say, which means you can do a cadence of 45 per drone ship each year for a total of 135. Next year, they want to do 144. So William Gerstenheimer said that back in September, that is what their plan is for next year, 144. So we want to see how they can get to 144. And then what could they really get to without having to get more pads or more drone ships or something like that? What are some of the possibilities? So now, in order for us to hit, see, this is still short. It's 9 short of that 144.
Well, and it's well short of Elon's every 2 days. That's
oh yeah. So you'd have to turn them around. And the other thing to remember is that you know, of course, Still Love You only operates on the West Coast. So that means they would have to actually need 45 flights going out of Vandenberg. You know, and the question is whether they're going to actually require 45 out of Vandenberg or less. And of course, there are, you know, these return to launch sites that you're going to have, and you get a few in there every now and then. You get some expendable ones. You don't always need the drones. You don't have to rely on them. So it's possible you have enough returns. But the thing is, at the Cape really only can do 90 with a return like that. If we change the return to something else, we'd be able to tell. Okay, so what we're trying to do is figure out what is going to be either the deficit or the credit that we have on the number of drone ships. Do we have enough for the returns or not? And so sort of here we're going to be seeing that if we have 60 launches here and we have 90 available, well, then I guess that means we have 30 extra that we're able to do. So, you know, you might be okay, especially if you say all the 39A launches, which tend to be returned to launch site. It's the Starlink ones that like to land because they really want to squeeze out that extra payload.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, how much does that, what's the payload cost? It's a couple of tons, but what it comes down to right now, the Starlink satellites, I mean, they used to launch close to 60 at a time, but now they have the bigger satellites. They're launching 23. So these are much bigger. It could cost them 2 to 3 Starlink satellites for return to service. Okay, to return to launch site.
Yes.
And that may not seem like much. It's just 3. But if you're doing 100 launches a year that are just Starlink, that's 300 satellites you didn't launch. Yeah. So you're like, yeah, we want to get as much out. And so it really is worth the effort to have the drone ships and the crews and the times. I mean, you just think about it, there's a lot of effort to go out there. So what is a way to be able to do a little bit more than that? So if we're increasing next year, so we can see we're going to, you know, this is about what the allotment is. It works with what they have. We know Slick 40 can go to 4. So if we imagine it goes to 4 next year, suddenly we're going to have about 91 launches going on a Slick 40.
Right.
And just with the drone ship support alone, we're going to have a deficit of 1. So we're going to have at least 1 return.
Right.
All right. And if you have any returns coming out of 39A, that's just going to get worse.
Right.
It's possible that now that they have the crew arm on Slick 40, they may be able to allow to use 39A a bit more. So NASA's a bit skittish about, it's like that's our only crew arm there. If something goes wrong, it's kind of risky. So they're a bit risk averse, but maybe they can go to like 14-day turnarounds on there. And you see with something like that, we get pretty close to 143.
Right. Right.
It was just almost a 144, and maybe Vandenberg picks up one here and there or something like that. But we're now getting a deficit of about 15. We need 15 more drones.
Yeah.
Now, one way we could get that is that maybe one of these is able to do a turnaround of 7, and then the other one does a turnaround in 7, and then we're getting pretty close.
Right.
I think the best you could possibly do is 6.
Yeah.
I really don't think you could do much better than that. Okay.
Right.
So now that means at that point, they are doing a launch cadence of about 2.75 per week.
Right.
Overall. Okay. That's overall. And so now what's the importance of this number? So it looks like we have enough drone ships. We have enough pads. It can be done.
Right. Right.
Hopefully we don't need any drones. Okay. It looks like I picked up 14 because I only said eight returns. So 14 of them are actually drone landings here because assuming those are Starlink launches, which they probably are.
Yep.
This means something very important. That means they have to produce 2.75 second stages per week. They are expendable.
Yeah. And
they're
also,
throwing them away.
Let's not forget how many Starlink satellites they have to produce every week, because most of these launches are Starlink launches. So that's a lot of Starlinks.
A lot of Starlinks.
Yeah.
And they seem to have that down. So there is like no chip shortage for whatever they want, because they're producing the Starlink satellites and they're producing the dishes at incredible rates. So you can now buy the dishes at Best Buy. When it gets to be like that, it's like, wow, there's no waiting list. They really have an ample supply. But still, you're talking about a second stage that's just going to be thrown away, and you have to make 2 and almost 3 of them a week.
Right.
And then you have to transport them to where they are. So, what are there going to be ways of improving that situation? That's an awful lot. And I've got some ideas there on what they could do. I don't know if they're doing it already, but I've always kind of wondered that when some of those boosters are getting towards end of life, you've got 9 Merlin engines that may still be perfectly good. You're just not quite sure. Or you're going to say, we're just going to use them for an expendable mission. Well, I can think of 9 expendable missions, put them on second stages, just add, the vacuum on there. Now, I think they're identical. Maybe it's like, someone will say, no, the throat diameter is a little bit different or something like that. But I think they are virtually identical. So why not use that? Because that's usually the most expensive part. The other thing I wonder is, could you actually have a booster chop shop at KSC where you take a first stage booster and cut it up to make a second stage out of it? Now, of course, you can only make 1 second stage for every 9 that you have there. But, that's one possibility that you could start saying, let's make cheaper second stages. Let's start recycling all these things to be able to get them to work better. Okay. So that's going to be an incredible rate of production. So if we want to go to 200, how do we get to 200? Okay. Now, to get to 200.
Before we continue here, one other little thought. I know that they're using the boosters more than 10 times each, but if they were using them average of 10 times each, they need 15 boosters just to get to 149. That, in order, in 1 year, they have to have 15 of these boosters, which is not nothing either. So
evident. Yeah. But they're 18. They're probably going to get to 20. So it looks like they're able to get to 20. And it seems like they have ample stock. I haven't checked it out myself, but Ozan feels like, they got such a supply of them. Don't worry about them. Now, the turnaround time on them, I think the best refurbishment has been like 9 days. They've been able to refurbish them when they came back.
Right.
But I think it's still been like 3 weeks between launches.
Yeah.
So they've been able to do it in under 30 days, and they seem to have enough. And if they're extending out to 20 days or 20 launches, man, they don't need that much to be able to cover it. So if we wanted to get to 200 launches, which may be what they want to do the year after that, I don't know if you can do the turnaround on slick. I mean, if what if we drop this down to 7 days here?
Right.
Okay. And then let's say Vandenberg, for some reason, you need all those polar launches, or the DoD just has like a bunch of military satellites they got to put up, and they're usually polar anyways. So if we're able to get that down to 7-day turnaround, you get yourself pretty close, which means, of course, I Still Love You would have to be at 7 days. So that's the only way you can do a 7-day turnaround there. And now then you see we have kind of this deficit. We're getting kind of close. You could potentially say, yeah, maybe 39A, we can get down to 6. If we can do Slick 40 at 4 days, we can do that at 6. Or if you have something crazy, like you decide that you want to make, 3-day turnaround, then you're like comfortably well past it. And we'll look at the ridiculous numbers that
they're also going to have to build another drone ship, obviously, if they want to be able to do this.
Maybe not. Okay. So, if we go to like 3-day turnaround for all of them, then, we're talking about basically,
that's a 1 a day.
That's nice. That basically it's 1 a day, and these don't add up because these are being turns into integers, so they should have fractional amounts here. But let's kind of go back to what we think would be the reasonable one, and that if you could even see, I was saying probably 7 days there. Back to 4. Let's get this back to 4.
I think you got to do.
So it might be some point, and the thing is, maybe to go above that, it may be that 39A, because it's NASA, and they're more cautious. You might be something like that, and then you would have to go ahead and get 3 here. And if we get 3, I mean, you can hit that comfortably. You can hit that comfortably, and then I even wonder if this one went to 9, whether. Oh my goodness, yeah. So if something like that, you're able to do it. So once a week out of Vandenberg, it's just possible, but we have a deficit of about 45 on the drone. So maybe that just means you need a new drone ship. You just build a new drone ship. It shouldn't be that hard. You'd be able to do it. Or there's some other ideas, and this is what we've been playing with, like talking to Ozan and Aeneas about the different possibilities. So.
Right.
Some of them are just kind of crazy, but people are going to bring them up. So let's just talk about it. The most obvious one is like, well, why not just hop back from the drone ship? Just leave the drone ship out there, fuel it up, and launch back.
Yeah.
Okay. So you think you'd be able to do that, and you think, oh, it's just a little bit of spritz, and that should be enough to do it. Well, according to Aeneas's calculations and the type of trajectory and everything you'd want to have, and if I've got these things wrong, it's on me, not him. Okay. I think he estimated that you might need about at least a third of prop load. The other thing you would need, of course, is for aerodynamics, we have to put a nose cone on there to make sure it goes up all right. And it's going to be a fairly similar trajectory. But remember, you're not launching from a launch pad. You're launching with the barge.
Yes.
And do you really want to light up all 9 Merlins on that thing? You don't have a proper launch pad. Fueling is going to be a problem. Where's it going to come from? You're going to need a support ship for that. And you're going to be bringing LOX out to, a tank farm out there. You're going to need to change the drone ships to be able to do that loading. The drone ships are actually going to become launch vehicles. And how do you support it on the pad? Because are you going to launch with the legs extended? Because the legs don't fold up. They only unfold. So it's like, I mean, that's not going to work. And then assuming you could do all that, I mean, that's like a lot of complexity, a lot of costs. Assuming that could be done, you got to remember, you basically are relaunching a booster without recertifying it. And then there might be a question like, what about the FTS? We've got to make sure that's all working and all that other stuff. You have to make sure it's right. So it hasn't been refurbished, and you are effectively giving it another launch on all the stresses. And maybe it's not a full launch, but still there's the stresses. There's going to be reentry heating. There's going to be all that it has to go through again.
Well, and let's also realize that not that SpaceX is creating these NOTAMs all the time, or notice to air people, whatever, that you have to do another one for the launch to go back again. It's and it's heading towards land. So, it's like suddenly you've got a landing on land, which is a more significant incident than landing out in the middle of the ocean somewhere.
Right. So it seems like, that would be the real easy thing, because, we've seen what the Grasshopper did. It must be like really easy. But when you start to look at the specifics, it's like, maybe that's not such a good idea.
I think the way that people might understand this is whatever it took for it to get all the way to the barge, which is basically
Yep.
boosting a second stage almost to orbital velocity, it has to do to get back again. Now it doesn't have all
Just
the crap
about.
on the top, but so it's not as heavy, but it has to do the
You don't
same
need
profile.
quite as much propellant, but
Yeah.
the flight path is going to be very similar. I mean, and this is not me saying it. These are guys, guys who were sitting there and were thinking it. It's like, no, it's not like it's just going to be some simple little low flight path that just kind of comes in real slow supersonic. It's like, no, it's still kind of, or subsonic. It's going to be supersonic. It's going to be up pretty high. And you're right. You're going to have all those NOTAMs and everything else going on. It's probably completely not the idea of hopping back. So like, put the kibosh in that. Now, another thing that Ozon has proposed is that there may be some modifications they can do, and maybe at the expense of only one satellite and not a whole lot, is not going as far out. Only having it so that you come back to a drone ship that's maybe 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers.
So they could do a partial boost back burn, like a little bit of
a partial boost back, not come back all the way, but it doesn't have to be a return to landing. You can go ahead and do something like that. I also propose is like, well, is there a chance like just land in the Bahamas, just find some island out in the Bahamas?
That's true.
That's kind of far enough that kind of fits the bill and just kind of land there and then, put them on a ship and transport them back and everything else.
What's that island that Richard Branson owns, Necker Island? Just have Elon build a landing pad there.
Yeah, but I guess it's not the Bahamas, unfortunately, is not really where they need it to be. It's a little bit off, but it would be nice. So that would be one way of being able to do partial return to launch site kind of things is having the drone ships a little bit closer.
Right.
But the other idea that Ozon has, and this is pretty cool, is basically turn the drone ships into a parking lot. All right. So he's pretty sure that you could return more than one on the same drone ship. You just move one of them out of the way, and they're so accurate. Just have the next one land right next to it.
Right.
A little ballsy, but and you could probably you might be able to put three per
like
drone.
What would that be? Yeah, like a parking lot. It's basically like you just catch one, move it to the side.
Move it to the side. The next one comes down. The next one comes now. Okay, now I've got some variations on that because they might say, "Oh, we're a little bit nervous about that." So maybe what you do one of these things is that you do two launches like maybe only a day apart, very, very close. And you have two of them out there very close and they both catch their boosters. Then they come close together and you actually transfer a booster from one drone ship over to the other. And then the other one catches one. And then maybe you do it one more time and slide them over. So that means one drone ship is acting as the catcher and then just kind of transferring it over to the other one. And then they bring it back in. And you might be able to increase the drone ship cadence that way. And of course, what you'd want to do is you'd want to launch like bang, bang. You don't want to have like 4 days between them because then the drone ships are kind of sitting out there doing nothing for no reason, but just being a parking lot. So what you want to do is you get them. And then I thought, wait a minute, there might be another way because at first I was thinking of why not have a proper boat that's like a cargo ship that the boosters, the drones stay out there. And when they're done, you just come over the crane, you pick it up and you start stacking them like wood in the cargo hold. It just come, and then you motor back pretty quickly. And potentially you can do it because, when you have these factory fishing vessels that you just don't, fish and come back to port to process the fish. You actually process them in place. Well, wait a minute. When you're out there, maybe you can start doing the refurbishment actually out there. So when you come back in, you're able to save a little bit of time when doing that if you wanted to increase the launch cadence.
Right.
But then I was thinking, well, wait, maybe we don't necessarily need, some fancy cargo ship where we're putting them in horizontally. Yeah. Maybe what we do is we come up with what I'm going to call the quiver. So you have kind of a third drone ship that's not designed for landing. And then rather than having a crane, you have the octograbber, which is already taking the booster when it lands, it's able to move it or slide it around. So what you do is that you have two drone ships kind of, whatever safe distance apart or wherever they need to be. And the quiver is kind of sitting off here. And as soon as a booster lands, it comes over and it's a flat ship that just comes right up, perfectly aligned like that. And now you just slide the booster off. That becomes your parking lot. So you never land on that parking lot.
Or you could even think a little bit like an
egg
crate that they each have their own little squares that they fit inside. So you just drop them in there and that way they don't bounce into each other and stuff on the way back.
And that could be crewed, unlike the drone ships, which obviously are uncrewed because you don't want crew on there when things are landing. But you're doing the transfer, and then when they're in there, they could be doing any sort of refurbishment that's necessary to bring it back. Ozon has had another great idea, because there's like a cost when you come into the Port of Canaveral, and then they got to transfer it off, and they got to put it on a truck. And then it has to be horizontal at that point, because it has to go into bridges and everything else to get out of the port and get it over to where it was. Not just build a wharf at the end of Rocket Road, right where Slick 40 is.
Yeah.
And just have the drone ship come right in there and just slide it right off, and maybe keep it vertical the whole time, so you are never horizontal. So you could just go ahead and get it on out there.
That would probably actually save on some of the wear and tear, because I would think going horizontal is it's stressful, because the vehicle is meant to stand upright, and when it's horizontal and unpressurized, unless they pressurize it with nitrogen. But even if they do that, that's a pain in the butt to have to pressurize it with nitrogen.
Yes, you definitely have to pressurize it, especially when you go horizontal. So that would be the thing, is, again, with that cargo ship, they're saying, oh, the cranes are going to come up and it's going to stack it like cords of wood. Like, whoa, we have to make sure that it's actually properly configured to go horizontal at that point. And that seems to be something they do more at port, because that's when they have access to everything. So there is actually a tweet thread out there from Ozon that was kind of talking a little bit about that. He's got a pretty nice thread you can find out there that's just talked about the different cadence and some of his different ideas. So I'm doing some of that from memory. There's quite a lot in there. I would definitely take a look at looking at how to reduce it in what you'd be doing with the drone ship. So down in this thread, he sort of talks about that, the end of Rocket Road, being able to do something like that. And it was looking at this tweet thread that I thought, oh yeah, let's come up with a quiver, which, rather than being that kind of ship, is maybe a kind of drone ship. So maybe it's a bit slow going out, but it would be one way of being able to increase your cadence and getting a lot more on there. So definitely some great ideas from them on that.
These are really cool ideas. I love this idea of, like, I really like the idea of utilizing multiple ships, although I would think if you would probably need some sort of ship that had a crane on it, but that's not that unreasonable.
You may not, because if you could just slide them off from one to another, you may not need it. So I think that's the idea of trying to avoid the crane and the infrastructure. And you're saying, at first we're saying, well, increase the cadence without creating more drone ships. And say, well, wait a minute, you just created another ship. You said no more drone ships. Like, well, the idea is, like, the drone ship is a nice solution, but the thing is, as we go further with more and more launches, we don't want there to be solutions like, we need another drone ship, we need another drone ship. Let's find something that's a better solution, that, if we're going to build a ship, let's just build one that solves this problem, so we don't have to have 5 drone ships. And also, that waste of fuel, like getting those drone ships out there, bringing it back in, out there again, back and forth. That's a lot of wasted time and fuel and everything.
Well, and that's one of the other things. If you have a ship that's made not as a barge, but as an actual ship that can travel at a faster speed and is more energy efficient, because it's designed to cut through the water. So that will reduce costs.
So our big idea is some sort of support vessel, a quiver, that you just stack them all in there, that becomes the parking lot for them. That's a lot faster. Will probably reduce the overall cost of operating the drone fleet, of maybe recycling the old first stages into that. And then the other ththing is, like, if you want to extend the life of the booster, so once it gets to 20, you might be like, we're not sure, are we really going to be able to make it to 30? This is getting old and creaky, kind of like me and my back. So, it just doesn't, we're not quite sure. So rather than risking losing 23 Starlink satellites, let's just do the launch 20 and do a return to launch with the older boosters. So when the boosters basically go out to pasture, what you do is you start bringing them back. And then now you don't need the drone ships. You just say, okay, for those, we'll accept the fact that it's only going to be 20. And we'd rather not, if they're going to blow up, we'd rather only lose 20 rather than 23. And so there's an economic calculation that's going on there that, it's clearly that those 3 Starlink satellites are worth the cost of a drone ship going out there and back versus returned to launch site. And then the other question is going to be how quickly they can do the refurbishment. I think, 9 days between them, it seems to be pretty good. But the one way you could also do that is that if it takes a certain amount of time while it's sitting out there, if you're stacking them up for a couple weeks before you start to come back into port, well, maybe you then set it up that you can do refurbishment. And the question is that refurbishment that can be done at sea? It may be a bit difficult to do.
I don't know that you could do all of it, but certainly you could do some things.
Mhm.
If you did go to the expense and trouble of having a large crane there, you could do a thing like lift them up and restow the landing legs, things like that. That could be
Yes,
done.
yes.
Um, uh, and maybe at least an initial look over of the vehicles, to see what things are going to need to be refurbished, stuff like that. So certainly there are things you could do. I'm wondering if you would almost want to go with like an airport idea of like a hub and spoke idea, so that let's say that the quiver could hold 6 of them. So what you would do is launch 6 relatively rapidly, then
Yes.
bring it back, and then maybe you'd have another 6 in reserve, and then you wait until the ship comes back, and then you launch another 6, so like 24 hours a piece or so. So you launch 6 in 6 days, and then take a little break while the ship goes back, unstocks itself, things like that. So yeah.
Well, I think you want that for one reason, because one thing we didn't put in here as like, what are the things that will prevent you from hitting, 200 or, this year 100, where I'm
Right.
predicting like 98. And one of them is the weather. I mean, there was some
Yeah.
crappy weather that slowed things down for a while. And these other things, that there was a Starlink launch. We were going to have a double header, and the double header kept slipping. And it finally
Right.
happened. And remember, it was Falcon Heavy first, and then the Starlink launch. Even
Right.
though the Starlink launch was scheduled ahead of the Falcon Heavy, it was so close to the launch of Psyche, they were like, no, you cannot launch. We don't
Right.
care that you're ready to launch. So it sat there for days having to wait for Falcon Heavy. And then it was able to launch later in the day when it was all cleared out. So there are
Right.
things like that. And once you do that, he's like, the turnaround time is 4 days from the launch, not from what the previous launch schedule was. Is like,
Right.
it's from that. It takes them 4 days to get it ready. So every time you slip in the schedule because of weather. So now it might be that if you have the ability to be able to do rapid fire and just, launch them at an incredible cadence, because
Right.
it's no longer the drone ships that are doing it, you might be able to say, we've got some rough weather coming up in these weeks, and we know we're just not going to launch, and we
Mhm.
can make up for it either before or after. And so
Right.
that's a way of you being able to get a little bit around the weather problem. Because there's no reason why you can't launch, 2 launches a day,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
If you've got 2 pads, there's really no reason. But they've shown us that they've been able to do that twice already this year.
Right. Right. Man. So yeah, you don't think about all those it's sort of like what are they with the factories? It's like the production capacity, which is never what you actually produce. So
Yes.
it'd be like we have a capacity of 200 launches per year. We're actually going to get more like 160 or 170 or something, because there's going to be all
Yes.
this stuff that
Yes.
happens. But
Yes.
still,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So the design capacity. So it looks like the design capacity right now is potentially they could do 143, 144. That seems to be
Right.
whether they can hit that next year, I don't know. So their aspiration is 144. I think they'll be able to come pretty close, because they've shown they can turn a lot of these different things around.
Right.
And the bottleneck might just end up being that how quickly can they produce the second stages? And they're already probably producing them pretty close to 2 a week, and now they're going to be, or 1.5 a week or something like that. So it won't be that much of a stretch for them to get to 2.5.
These are crazy. And I just want to
Mhm.
like make a note for people that how many Apollo, just say take the 3rd stage, which would be an equivalent of that
Mhm.
2nd stage on the Falcon. Were there, I think they built 18 or 19 of those ever, right?
Mhm.
So we're looking at SpaceX building that in a few weeks.
They
That's how
built
fast they're able
100
to
this
build.
year, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they have 100 launches. They built 100 of them. Next
Yeah.
year, they're going to have to build 145. If they go to
Right.
200, they're going to build 200 of those in a year just to throw them away. So
Yeah.
you're going to want to find ways to get economies of scale. And the thing is, with the Falcon architecture, there is still a lot they can do before Starship comes online.
Right.
And Ozon thinks there is so much more they can squeeze out of, so much more potential and everything else,
Right.
that he thinks it's a good architecture. With some of these clever little things, you would be able to really still drive the cost down quite a
Right.
bit.
I will throw in one idea that's just spitballing on my part, but they could actually make use of the Falcon Heavy to launch Starlinks, because they're not limited by the volume anymore. They're limited by the amount of mass that they can throw into orbit. What if you return, so you return the 2 side boosters back to land, and then instead of doing what they do with the military, which is expending that center booster to get every single ounce of power, you just back it off and you don't burn it that long, and then it comes back down to the drone ship.
Yeah, which is the original architecture. So they can
Yeah.
still do that. So that was always set up that way. And that means, that's another way of being able to get, if maybe the goal isn't number of launches, the goal
Right.
should be
It's
launch mass.
satellites. Yeah, it's
And
how
so
many
if it
satellites.
really comes to launch mass, you might be saying, well, we really don't need 144. We'll be fine with 120. And then you just need for what might be, and this is where those guys would have to check me. Just because we have 3 Falcon 9 boosters, I don't know if we can put in 3 times the mass or more than 3
Well,
times or
there's
a
going
little
to
bit
be a
less
volume
than that.
limitation eventually.
Yeah, there's going to be the volume, but assuming there's no volume restriction, if that could be done, then yeah, you're getting more bang for the buck out of that one drone ship that you need to capture the booster. And I think so there are, there's many different versions. There's one of the 2 boosters land on the drone ships, and then one of them gets expendable. But you're right, you could keep it that way.
Well,
and
I don't think
eventually,
for Starlink, they couldn't afford to expend the center core. They would have to catch it,
right.
But you don't have to burn that center core nearly as hard as you do.
And think about it. It's like you're getting more bang for the buck out of that second stage.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, was not having to build as many second stages.
Not having to build as many second stages. So you get more bang for the buck. Maybe your turnaround time on the Falcon Heavy is not as much, but if you can do 1 Falcon Heavy in the same time it takes you to do 3 Falcons, assuming that's the same launch mass and everything else,
right?
I should run that by them. They'll be able to tell us, if you're looking at it that way, if volume is not a problem, then
the big question and the unanswered question still is whether you can catch that third booster, the center core.
Oh, you can.
They've never actually done it. So I'm just saying.
They did. I think on on the 3rd launch, they finally got that to work. So they have been able to catch it. Yeah. They've caught it. There was one where they caught it. Because remember, they had I think they had 3 Falcon Heavies in this long hiatus without them. Right. I think on the 3rd attempt, they actually managed to do it. So the first one, they missed it. The second one, I think they caught it, and then something happened after it. And I think the 3rd one, they did it. So there's no reason why they can't do it.
No. And especially, again, if they don't push it quite as hard as they have been. So it's coming in a little less fast than it.
Yeah. And I think part of it is they've had way more practice since then. At that point, they didn't have that much practice. They didn't know what they were doing at that time,
Well, okay. So big picture here, just for people, we've been just geeking out on all this stuff. The big picture here is that SpaceX next year, according to Elon, is going to put up, SpaceX is going to have put up more satellites into orbit than all of humanity minus SpaceX has ever done since 1957. And that is crazy.
Humanity's worth of satellites in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, no, they just said cumulatively. I think they meant that SpaceX is
cumulative.
But still,
at that point.
But that's a crazy number. And that means that this company has basically all of the experiences of all human spaceflight history they have in the one company. They've done as many launches, which means they know what the hell they're doing. Nobody else has launched.
Well, even more because they're so good at it because they don't have anyone that's stale.
Yes.
If you look at, this is the complaint. The reason why the World Series ends up being teams that were not the number 1 seeds is the number 1 seeds get a week off.
Yes.
And they forgot how to play baseball. The pitchers can't find the strike zone. The batters are not quite as sharp. It's there is something about continuing to do that. And that is the same with the launch teams, is that they have so much experience and they're rotating everyone in and out that they've got it under control. And this is something that if you're working for these other launch providers, it must be a really fruitless job that you're sitting there. It's once a year, you get to go out there and say, T-minus 10, 9. It's come on. It's what are you doing the rest of the time? And, they're constantly training. I remember that, being a runner and just training for nothing. It's aren't we going to have any races or something like that? It's you need that.
Yeah. Or the other thing is just, if you think about being an athlete or a high performance employee or something, you take that week vacation and you come back and you're just oh, I lost it. Yeah. It doesn't take long to lose that edge you have. So, yeah. So,
And they definitely have an edge. And remember, just this one team that they have, they have I wouldn't be surprised, at least, they probably have 2 out in Vandenberg and maybe 3 in the Cape that they rotate through.
Yeah. And that means if somebody gets sick, they just rotate somebody from the other team in or something.
Yeah. And then when new ones come in, they're working with these veterans right next to them. And so you never have any team that's green anymore. You have a red team and a blue team, but you'll never have a green team.
Right? Oh, hey, there you go. All right, cool. Well, you got anything else for us? That's
all right.
Super geeky. I hope people have enjoyed this. It's really geeking out, but it is fascinating to think about how complicated it is to launch at this
Yep.
sort of cadence. Oh, and thank you for the picture. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Okay, so this is my journey to the picture that I took. All right.
Yes.
So I think it was a little over a year ago, I saw this picture. And the story of this picture is great because you'll see a lot of these nice launch arcs, long exposure arcs. But the thing about this is that it actually has an element of humanity in it.
Right.
It's something that is very, very captivating. Believe it or not, this was at night. Okay.
Yeah.
This was very dark at night and it was so bright, it made it look like it was daytime. And the other reason why, this has a certain amount of meaning to me is I know who four of the people are sitting on there. One of them is not me, but it was Anna and Antonio. Okay. And that was their first rocket launch. And they had come to see the Artemis launch Labor Day a year ago.
Right.
That was a second scrub. Okay. And it was a rather exciting weekend for them because, the day before they got to meet Ellie.
Yep.
Then the next day in the afternoon, they get to go over and meet Felix at his house and then get to meet Tim at the Starbucks in Orlando right after it. And then
they're doing better than me. I haven't met Felix or Tim. Yeah.
Right. Now, this was also Ellie's first launch, live launch, but there's already a meetup and we were supposed to be at the Max Brewer Bridge, but their friends knew about this secret place that you could go to right here, which is the biolab. And they arrived like just minutes before the launch happened. And Matt Cutchell was already out there setting it up and he had a friend out there. They basically photobombed it for him.
Right.
And it just turned out, it made it perfect because you could just see the awe and everything else. And these are all aspiring rocket scientists. And in the end, this was called Chasing the Dream. And that's why it's on my wall back here.
Right.
So, it's one of my favorite pictures because it has some meaning. And that's where I learned the importance of composition from Matt. Not how to do it, but the importance of it. Now, there are a lot of great launches out there that you'll see beautiful scenery over nature and everything, but they're missing something. They're missing a human element. And that's what I kind of loved about that. So I've been trying to aspire to get that as much as possible. So eventually I went actually back to that very same spot.
Right.
And to try to do it myself. And I had my Model Y lined up in a particular way. In the last second, I realized, why don't I just hang my cell phone camera up here and just see what's able to pick up.
Right.
And this is the stream. And the one thing you're going to notice, and you hear, I love that launch says 30 seconds. You just always the way he says 30 seconds is a certain way. And you'll notice that it's 30 seconds behind the stream from what's going on. And I have this on my YouTube channel, which is Going Ballistic Motion. If you have a Model Y or Model 3 or any Tesla, this is how you check out the sound system of your Tesla. Put it in there. It's unbelievable. When it starts to get above there, you start to hear the staccato of everything. It's great. Now, I learned a lot here, like clean the windows beforehand and all these other things. And there are all kinds of problems are going on there. And eventually the sound you hear is not the sound from the live stream. It actually is a sound of that resonating down.
That's very cool.
So right now you'll be able to hear it. And then I ended up getting kind of a little glimpse of that. So I started just chasing these things and trying to figure out what I could do if I could get some sort of different pictures. And then I think it's at some point, this thing, it just slips. There it goes. It just kind of slips by right at the top there. And again,
and look how fast, it's amazing how fast that thing is moving when it really gets going. It gets out of there.
Yes.
Crazy. Wow.
And then the sound just starts picking up now. And I think you can almost hear that now. It just really gets in there and it was magnified.
Unfortunately, I can't with the screen share. I can't hear it, but
Okay. So
we'll go to your YouTube channel and we're checking.
Go to the YouTube channel and take a look at that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So then like a few weeks later, actually Anna and her sister came out to visit and we went out to watch the sunset. And when we came back, we're looking up there, what's that? And someone said the time, and the time goes, why is that time? It's like, oh yeah, that's when tonight's launch is. We just missed the launch. And there it was. So we missed the live stream. And I did not realize that from 150 miles away, we could actually see the launch. That kind of got me on to like, well, let's start looking at these things. The next time there was a launch, I was down in St. Armand Circle in Sarasota. And then, here we go. I was able to pick it up with my camera, what was going on here. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit because the thing that's interesting about this, and this was right at sunset, is you're going to see what ends up happening right about, and then do I end up picking it up somewhere in here? Ta-da! There was a full moon.
Nice. Nice.
See the picture over my shoulder right here?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That was the night they made
Oh,
the shot.
really? That's
They were
cool.
chasing that shot for 3 years.
Right.
So I think there's several photographers that got it figured out. And I think Trevor Melman was able to help them out. And it was actually good fortune that allowed this to happen, because the night before, the flight was scrubbed due to bad weather around there.
Oh,
So they got to launch it the next day.
Yeah.
And the next day was a full moon, and the launch was actually when the full moon was coming up. And with that software, they were able to figure out where they had to be in order to be able to get that trajectory with it transiting the full moon. And again, just an incredible shot and, composition that you have there that allows these things to really mean more than just an ordinary rocket launch.
Yeah.
So it's,
and I love the bottom of the moon that just shows how violent the sound waves are coming off the bottom of that rocket, that they're distorting the whole bottom of the moon.
Yes. Yep.
It looks like
it's
got
the shock
hair.
waves. That's the shock waves. Exactly. A hairy moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while I'm futzing around doing this amateur stuff, they're really coming up with some pretty impressive shots.
Right.
Then just some more things are realizing that, hey, with your cell phone, you can see something, from near our house. Isn't that cool? Can't we do a little bit more with this? So then I started thinking like, well, can I do a longer exposure?
Right.
And so here we go with the cell phone. Now, the problem with the cell phone is you're limited to 30 seconds.
Yes.
30 seconds here. And then this is the gap before it will allow you to do the next 30 seconds and the next 30 seconds.
Right.
So I'm beginning to realize that, okay, well, this is lots of fun to do. And then, of course, the other thing is these are actually compositions. These are basically Photoshopped together. So there are 3 pictures that I then have to link together to be able to get to go. And so you're starting to see some more of doing that. This was a crew launch because it's kind of launching in a different direction.
Right up the coast. Yeah, very different trajectory. Yeah.
But you see how many different segments I was able to get. 1, 2, 3, like 4, 5, 6. So there's like 6 different shots that I needed for that. And that's okay. So then I finally decided to go out and buy a real camera.
Let's do it for real, man.
And get that. And now these breaks here are actually the clouds. So now once I got the camera, the problem I was contending with is like it was always overcast. And sometimes I could or could not be able to see anything, and then trying to figure out what the focus is. And eventually I started to find out, and it was probably windy up there. So everything was blowing around. Didn't have I had too big of a tripod. I was having it up too high, and I realized just make it shorter. Right. And then you won't get that vibration. And then I finally got this shot. This is like a 3 a.m. shot. And I was just so happy with, it was like 3 a.m. I get up there and I'm trying to listen to the SpaceX live stream, and it's on and it's just coming on there. It's like waiting for SpaceX. And I'm looking at the time and it's not coming up. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Oh, they must have scrubbed or something like that. I'm playing with my phone and I look up and like, crap, there it is. And then I had like push the button. So I had everything set up for it, and I ended up missing the first 30 seconds.
Right.
What am I gonna do with that? And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I could just superimpose a SpaceX logo on it. So it actually was okay that it was cut off like that. Right. So this is kind of like one idea of like, where are we going to get the SpaceX logo and put it in there? And it's like, I have no idea how you create this part here. Right. So, then just, going around, taking more shots. This is like, a nice close up with my new camera, just to be able to prove what it was. Again, more cloudy days. More cloudy days, more cloudy days, this coming to the Cape and realizing the f-stops and the settings that work 150 miles away do not work from 10 miles away. So I do not know how to do it from the Cape. It's like, it's hard. It's really hard. And then I finally get this one. So this was in August when they had the first double header. Right. This is Crew 7 here at 3 a.m. And then this is a Starlink launch out of Slick 40. So this is 39A and Slick 40. And that's at like 9 p.m. So it's the same calendar day and pretty much taken from the same location. Right. This is where Space Force is, and this is what they just recently shut down. And this is why I had my angry rant about that, because just look how it's a great shot there. And you're also in a great location for a return, because this one, which surprised me, is the crew launches are now doing returns. Right. So right above my head, almost the zenith, you are seeing this in the return to launch. And these are the different images, stills that I was able to get out of the video that's going on there. And some of them, they almost look like a dream sequence. One of them looks like a little girl sleeping. like right here. You can see
Right.
like her pillow, you can see her hair, her head, her hands. There's the blanket, there's like the teddy bear, and there's like this raccoon monster in her dream that's kind of coming in there. It's just, and of course, these are the burn back and everything else, and the plumes interacting. So you only get this on the returns because the two plumes interact and give this. So this is not the space jellyfish. That's different. That's just the second stage going to. This is this wonderful interaction, and it's very turbulent and everything moving around. And it's all being lit up by itself. It's not, the sunlight or anything like that because you're at twilight or anything like this. No, this is basically the light from them. So yeah, these are, I think, some interesting images that you got. Again, didn't get a very good shot from home. This is a little bit better, lousy weather. And then one of the last times I was out at Space Force, I don't know where the track was going to go. And because I didn't know where the track was going to go, I wasn't quite sure whether I could set up a shot. So I said, well, I'll just do it as a video. And what I wanted to do was sort of show it going over the Starlink dish. So I had the Starlink dish there, kind of put it in there, and then it ends up going over. And so that was like an inspiration. Like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Because again, composition, the idea is there's some way to be able to get Starlink in the launch.
Right.
And then it's kind of on going up there, and it was very, very hard to find the right place to set it up without a lot of practice. I would have to go there and know exactly where it goes each time to be able to get that.
Yeah. And to get the right exposure and stuff, because clearly,
everything like that. So it's like, somehow I want to have the two together. Wouldn't that be neat? And then I said, well, I know pretty much where the launches go. I said, let's try to get that human element. So here's my first attempt at a self-portrait. And unfortunately, it was a really cloudy night, but I was confident enough of where it was going to go in the sky. I knew exactly where I had to sit. So at that point, I knew where it was going to go. And then a few nights later, because again, practice. I mean, it doesn't work one night. Just wait 3 or 4 days. There'll be another chance. So this one here, and again, you can see the long streak of the second stage, everything like that. The hardest part of this is I had to sit still for so long. And then trying to figure out the lighting. And I think there can still be some improvements. It's a little bit out of focus. But then I said, well, wait, instead of putting me in there, why not go ahead and put the dish in? And so this was like a full moon, and it was going to be a perfect launch. And they got down to T minus 30 seconds, and suddenly, hold. I was like, oh no. And I was just about ready to push the button. But like, and so you can see the full moon transiting here. You can see Jupiter kind of moving along there as well. And what this is this is an airliner landing a few minutes before into the Sarasota airport. So that's like what it almost would have been had it actually kind of gone up. And that was the launch I was hoping to get that night. And then the next night I was able to get it, but I don't think I got my setting quite right. I mean, I was kind of going for it. I probably had it off a little bit. You see, it would have been nice to have it maybe a bit more under the first stage and then waiting out by the second stage. And then I finally got a little bit better. And then as soon as I took that picture, that was like last week. It was last Friday. So it's not even a week. Okay. So the launch was basically late Tuesday night, very early Wednesday morning. And here we are in Wednesday, basically. So not even 5 days ago, I took this shot. And as soon as I put it, I was like, oh, the orientation is completely wrong. Why am I doing that? It's very clear. I can cut it on through here. Now, you can see there is an airplane photobombing. See, right coming on in there at the same time. And I realized, oh, man, that's what I should have done. And then that's when I started playing around with the idea. So this here, remember that first picture I had that I put the star logo over? That was like one of the best sort of streaks that I had. I said, I'm going to use that. And I figured out how to extend Dishy up. So I ended up getting a pipe, making sure it was what I thought was about the right length. And I took a picture of it. And this is transparent. And then I superimposed it because I could get the light. So I was able to scale it just right. So the lights down here all matched up perfectly. And then I took a bunch of sample shots in different locations. So I had like 3 or 4. I realized, I have to adjust it this way. I was like too high of that. And then I saw it's like, that's exactly where it needs to be. So this was a shot that I took about an hour before. Came down, lined it up, made sure it was there. And then all I had to do was hope they had the same launch trajectory.
Right.
The
Which they
launch
did.
trajectory would be the same.
Which they did.
And this was like 2 minutes before, and I'm like, oh no, not that darn airplane again.
Yeah, but that's what Photoshop's for, because in your original image,
Yep.
there's still a plane in there, and I
And
got rid of
then
that, no problem.
then it came. Now,
Right.
this was the hardest part, was not pushing the trigger right there.
Right.
Because it comes up, I think right about these lights, and then, then arcs up, and then it does this.
Right.
And I wanted to probably get it right down around there. But at that point, I was like, oh, I'm missing the best part of it, the brightest part. I've got to get it in there. So I went ahead and launched it. And then you can see there's the airplane landing over there. And again, we can see how the second stage is able to extend itself all the way out and the movement of the stars. So I'm hoping to get another opportunity in a few days. What I will probably do is actually push the dish further back to make it a little bit smaller.
Right.
So I can put it down here more, and it'll look more like the SpaceX logo, and less like the X logo.
Right.
So it'll be a little bit smaller down in there. So we'll get a little bit more of that. Maybe I can drop this down also a little bit, so I don't have to wait so long for, when I'm going to go ahead and push the trigger. And I'm probably going to open up the f-stop a little bit, because it was a little bit dark, and then it would make this brighter, and then it would make the stars a little bit brighter. So you were able to help with, with Photoshop to kind of bring it out a little bit, but then it might have been too much. So it's hard to say whether the enhanced one looks better, or whether this, and of course I was playing the lighting. I did not want that dish to be too bright.
Yeah.
So I get the lighting out there, and I wanted
probably still, the big problem for me is always the ground. But what I'm doing is when I enhance your photos, I'm actually cutting the ground out and not enhancing the brightness of the ground. So that's how I can keep it from over saturating down at the bottom.
I think what I can probably play with the f-stop, and I'll probably be going up this week and just making some images without the streaks, of course. And actually what I just have to do is wait for an airliner to land. It's almost the right brightness.
Actually, it's true, because it gives you like this
an idea.
sort of path that shows. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. and I can use the stars as well. I mean, I think the stars are the good measure of that. And this is not going to oversaturate. It's not going to oversaturate me. No. It oversaturates me when I'm at the Cape. When you're 10 miles away, it's 150. Don't worry about it. It's not going to oversaturate. You got to make sure everything else is in balance, and that's going to come in there. So that's the story of the image and how I was able to pull it off. And I think there's a little bit of luck in there that everything kind of worked.
But but also a lot of practice and a lot of skill of working on it. But it's
so,
also really,
again,
I also love the fact that you get to see how the Earth is rotating, because the stars, it's, that's why I asked you how long the picture took. Cause it's like, well, that's how far the Earth rotates in 6 minutes, is that
in about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can also see the Earth is curved in order for it to make the orbit. I mean, that's why it's coming down.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and so it's again, it kind of cycles back to the whole theme, and that was the cadence of all these launches, how they're going to be increasing the cadences. And one of the benefits of that is that people like me can have this kind of hobby of shooting launches.
Right.
And just to get an idea of what it was like, I think right after 2000, 2001, 9/11, my family started coming down to Florida a couple times a year.
Right.
And sometimes we'd stay down here for, 2 weeks at a time or something like that. So we were spending a lot of time in Florida. Every time we were down here, there was never a launch. Right. Never. It'd be over Christmas holiday.
Oh, I used to go down.
Easter.
We spent 2 weeks a year in Florida, and there was never a shuttle launch while I was
never a launch. It's almost like, when everyone's in town, let's make sure there's no launches. So it was like unbelievable that spending so much time down in Florida and you never, ever get a launch.
Yeah.
And suddenly, and so if you were one of these people, it's like, I'm a launch chaser. I take photographs of it. It's like, well, you're going to get like that one chance, and you better not screw it up.
Exactly.
So last night I was nervous. I was like, I've done all my homework. I've done everything right. Cause I had a couple of cases where I hit the picture and started taking it. Then I did something stupid because I wanted to look at my phone, and then I accidentally turned it off. I'm like, you just blew the whole shot. Right. So I was like really nervous last night. It's like the weather is perfect. Everything's kind of lined up. I think everything is here. It's not windy. Things aren't going to be blowing. There's always some reason things are going to screw up.
Right.
And and then knowing it's like, okay, it's starting, making sure it's starting. Did I forget to do something here? Getting it ready. When I saw that image come out, Oh man, I just put out quite the holler at that point that I could not believe. You know, it's
You're
like
disturbing your
yes,
neighbors.
you know,
You're
just pumping the
disturbing your
arms. It's like,
neighbors.
oh, it was something else that it actually worked.
That's
And so
very
yeah,
cool.
it's a fun hobby to actually be able to do something like that. So if you come to Florida next year, and if you're here to visit Disney World for a week, not only is there a chance that you might see a launch, there's a chance you might see two or even three. Okay. And you know,
crazy.
there were some people that were here in mid-October that they got quite a bit. I mean, October 13th, it's like, oh yeah, we got two launches. How about that? The same day. And then a few days before there was a launch, you know, it's like a few days after. So yeah, if you come to Florida, you are going to see something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big change from, I'm sad that I was not, you know, I don't come to Florida as often anymore, although I'm going to have to come down sometime soon and see you. But anyway, yeah, it's incredible. SpaceX is doing amazing things. It's just, it's hard to even fathom how frequently they're launching versus what it used to be like. So it's amazing. So congrats to the folks who are building the satellites, building the first stage, building the second stage, building all the launch facilities and operating all that stuff. Keeping this cadence up has got to be absolutely insane. So amazing stuff. All right. So we've now talked for well over an hour. Do you have anything else to say, or are we
oh no, that's it. I've probably
cool.
exhausted everyone. I think if anyone's made it this far, oh yeah, he's just going on about that. But yeah, we'll be
this will be helpful though.
This
last little like 20 minutes of this video will be very useful for anybody who's considering coming to Florida and like taking pictures. Is like, okay, this is the kind of stuff you have to think about for you know, exposure, composition, all that stuff. So very, very useful.
Yes. Try to figure that out. The nice pictures I've seen is when they some of the photographers try to find some other element to add in there. Someone will take it around where the wharfs are, where there might be some nightlife or something like that going on, and a launch going over a restaurant or something like that. So, you know, and it's also nice to see some of that out in nature where you get the nice reflections in the water and all that. But you need to inject something else in there, and composition is so important. And this is not like from an expert. This is just like composition is important. I don't know how to do it, but I know it when I see it.
Well, you're getting there. I think the dishy with the SpaceX launch in the background is pretty cool. So
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of those right now, and the people that know what they're doing are going to pull off the trick a lot better. So
I don't
hopefully
know.
we start
That's
seeing
pretty
that.
good. Plus, you win for being original. So there you go. You got there first. So
that's why I had to keep my mouth shut those past couple days. Oh, I got an idea.
Well, you also have the advantage of being 150 miles away. In this case, it's actually better to be further away because you're able to get the kind of bigger arc of the launch and everything.
Yeah, it's exactly. You know, it might be that Orlando would be a little bit better, or somewhere kind of due west of it. A little bit closer, you get a much brighter plumes. They might be able to pull it off. But the thing is, you're going to have to find that spot, and you're going to have to do a couple of launches first. Or, you know, maybe Trevor Melvin is able to help you and say, it's going to be right here, and predict exactly where in the sky is going to be. But my cheat was that I'd already taken pictures, so I was able to make the composition and test it out where it had to be. So you're going to need a few launches to kind of know where they are. So tomorrow, CERN and I are heading over there because it's going to be a landing, also a launch and a landing.
Oh, cool.
And I was thinking, oh, I'll do the same thing. I'll bring Dishy. I'm like, no, you have no idea where the trajectory is. Don't even consider that. Just go there and enjoy the launch.
Yeah, exactly. Just go and enjoy and have fun. And
so I had to find a spot. Yeah, and whatever pictures I took at Space Force to kind of figure it out from there, I was like, that's not going to work either. And it's in the wrong location for doing that kind of composition. It has to be due west. And so, you've got to scout those locations out and then get the test ones. And then it probably has to always be like a Starlink launch. Maybe I think most of them are the same ones, but these other launches might do something different. Like the crew goes the other direction. You'll be all set up for it. Like, hey, wait a minute, it's out of frame. What happened?
They're heading north. They're getting out of here, man. So Yep. All right. Well, before I choke to death, I guess we'll go ahead and say goodbye and thank you again so much. This was actually fascinating, the launch cadence and the fact that you can be an awesome amateur photographer with all this stuff too. So thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. And everybody, make sure you follow Scott. I'll leave the link to his X profile and your YouTube underneath in the description. And everybody do the like and subscribe and all that stuff. And we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.